All right, we're going to dive into a really powerful idea today. What if the key to understanding crypto prices has absolutely nothing to do with all the stuff we hear about every day, the regulations, the politicians, but with something much, much bigger?
I mean, what if all the time and energy we spend watching Congress, cheering for certain candidates, or waiting for some big institution to give us the green light, what if it's all just a massive distraction? That's the provocative question we're going to explore, using the framework from Arthur Hayes.
And here it is, the two competing worldviews side by side. On the left, you've got the story you hear all the time. It's all about what the regulators and big institutions do. But on the right, that's Arthur Hayes' thesis, and it is brutally simple. He says the only thing that actually moves the needle is liquidity. That's it, just the sheer amount of money sloshing around the global system.
Okay, so let's get into the first part of this. If liquidity is the only thing that matters, where's it all going to come from? Well, according to Hayes, the money printer is already fired up. They've just given it a new, incredibly boring name.
So first, just a real quick refresher. You've heard this term a million times. For the past 20 years or so, when central banks needed to juice the system with cash, they used quantitative easing, or QE. It basically became shorthand for money printing.
And that, right there, became a huge political problem. The public figured it out. The term QE is now radioactive. Voters hear QE, they think money printing, and they immediately connect it to inflation and the rising cost of everything, which, is a total nightmare for any politician who wants to get reelected.
So you can't say you're doing QE anymore. What do? You call it something that sounds super technical and boring, something like a reserve management program. It's bureaucratic, it's confusing, and it is designed to make the average person's eyes glaze over, even if it's doing the exact same thing.
And that's the whole strategy in a nutshell. You don't actually change the policy, you just change what you call it. Because if people don't understand what you're doing, they can't really get mad about it when they go to vote, can they?
And this is the trap that politicians find themselves in. If you let a recession happen during an election year, it's basically political suicide. Your chances of getting reelected just crater to around 30%. But on the other hand, high inflation will get you thrown out of office just as fast. So what's the only path forward? You got to keep the economy juiced with liquidity, but you have to call it something that won't make the evening news.
So if the real story is this hidden money printing, what does that mean for the one thing everyone else seems completely obsessed with, regulation?
I mean, let's just take a step back and remember how we got here. Bitcoin didn't get to be a multi-trillion-dollar asset because governments helped it. It got there in spite of them. For years, most governments were openly hostile to it. It never needed their permission to become what it is today.
And this chart really just shows that disconnect perfectly. Think about it. If you had invested your money this year based only on all the positive headlines from politicians, you'd have seen a ton of good news, right? But your portfolio, well, it would probably be flat or even down. Why? Because the liquidity just wasn't there.
In this framework, regulations aren't the cause of a price boom, they're the result of one. Politicians only start getting friendly and creating rules after an asset class gets too big and popular to ignore. So if you're trying to make money by watching politics, you're essentially driving by looking in the rearview mirror. So this is the scoreboard that Hayes argues you should be watching. Forget the cable news drama. The only question you need to ask is this: are the big central banks of the world, the Fed, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, the People's Bank of China, are they printing money or are they taking it away? That's it. That's the whole game.
Okay, so what happens when all that liquidity suddenly vanishes? Well, the altcoin market just gave us a perfect and pretty brutal case study. What happened wasn't just another crash. It was a moment of shocking clarity. Yeah, that day was like a live stress test for the whole system. It was the moment the tide went out, and we all got to see who was swimming naked. It peeled back the curtain on what was really holding up the prices of thousands of these smaller tokens.
So here's how it all went down. First, you have these market makers, firms that are literally paid by crypto projects, creating an illusion of a deep, busy market with lots of buy and sell orders. But then, a shock hits the system, and they're forced to pull all that support. And in that instant, the real organic demand is revealed. And for so many of these tokens, it turned out to be basically zero.
And the result was just devastating. A lot of these coins didn't just have a bad day, they completely imploded. We're talking losses of 90% or more in the blink of an eye, all because that artificial floor just disappeared.
And Hayes' take on this is incredibly blunt. He says most of these projects are essentially worthless. They have no real users, no real product, nothing.
It was all just a big game of speculative hot potato between different funds. And when the music stopped, regular investors were the ones left holding the bag.
Okay, let's zoom out now, because this leads to the biggest piece of the entire puzzle. This whole dynamic, it's not just happening in the US. No, this is a global phenomenon that goes way beyond any political labels.
It's so easy to get caught up in the political theater, capitalism versus socialism. But if you actually look under the hood at how governments fund their spending, you start to realize those labels are almost meaningless.
And this table just lays it out so clearly. Think about it. Trump ran as a capitalist in 2020, then printed trillions and mailed checks directly to people. Democrats do the same thing to fund social programs. Over in China, the Communist Party does it to fund their state-owned companies. The ideology on the surface changes, but the action, printing money to pay for things, is always the same.
And this is really the ultimate punchline. The entire global financial system is built on the exact same foundation. Doesn't matter if you're in the US, Europe, or China. It's all a system of government debt being funded by central banks. And once you see that pattern, you realize that devaluing currency isn't some accident or a bug in the system. It's a global, coordinated feature.
So, let's just quickly wrap this all up. What are the key takeaways here? Number 1, the Fed is already printing money again, they're just not calling it QE. 2, regulations are just noise. Liquidity is what actually drives prices. 3, the altcoin crash showed us that most of these tokens had no real demand to begin with. And 4, every major government on the planet is basically stuck running the exact same play: print and spend.
So if this whole framework's right, then another huge wave of global liquidity isn't a question of if, but when. And that really leaves us with one final crucial question you have to ask yourself. As that next wave starts to build, are you going to be distracted by all the political theater, or are you going to be watching the scoreboard that actually matters?